Well, good to see all of you. Let's begin with a short prayer. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramartanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So we will, in these 3 days, today, tomorrow, and on Sunday, we will take a quick look at chapter 3 of the Gita. Now, Gita is not a new subject for most of you. We have had an opportunity to study Gita several times in several different ways from several different perspectives at different points in our life. And yet it is one text that we can never say, oh, I have finished the Gita, I've understood the Gita. Only an enlightened person can say that I have finished reading the Gita. Only for an enlightened person, there is no more necessity of reading these books and trying to understand them. And so it's helpful to keep on reading them again and again and again and again. And once we are able to catch the heart of the text, then every little detail in it falls into place and begins to make sense. And that's essentially the reason why we need to study these texts over and over again. It's like, just like in one sense, we can say the heart is the most vital part of our body. In a sense that the heart stops, everything stops. If now and then, if other parts of the body fail a little bit now and then, we can still survive. But as long as we are breathing, as long as the heart continues, we continue to live. In exactly the same way, every scripture, every shastra also has a heart. And a repeated study of these texts, which to actually discover, reaching the heart of that shastra, heart of that text. And once we find what that heart is, everything else, all other ideas, concepts, all fall into place. They all begin to make sense. And that's why a repeated study can be helpful. So I hope you have copies of your own, whatever Gita you follow. If they are nearby, it'll be helpful. So just look at the very first 2 verses of chapter 3. Chapter 3 is known as Karma Yoga. And of course, something that you are already aware, that when Krishna taught the Gita, he didn't give like 18 different lessons to Arjuna, saying, okay, now the second lesson is over. Now let's begin Karma Yoga. That obviously occurred at a much later date, that all the teachings got categorized and each of these sections was given a name. So the 3rd chapter is called Karma Yoga, which is not to say or not to think that the ideas related to Karma Yoga are available only in the 3rd chapter. And we shall soon see the genesis of these ideas is we already had them in an earlier chapter, in chapter 2. We'll take a look at that as well. But let's begin with the very first verse, first and second verses. So since all of you are muted, you keep yourself muted, but if you like, you can chant along with me. I'll chant the Sanskrit first. We can do the chanting together, and then we will look at the translation. Ata tritiyo dhyayaha Arjuna uvacha jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyo jayasi keshava Vyamishrene vavakyena buddhim mohayasiva me tadekam vadanishchitya yena shreyohamapnuyam. So Arjuna said, O Janardana, if according to you, knowledge is superior to action, why then do you engage me in this terrible action? With these seemingly conflicting words, you are as it were bewildering my understanding. Tell me that one thing for certain by which I can attain to the highest. Now it's interesting that the chapter begins with a question. And there is a view for those who are students of the Gita that all of the essential teaching that Krishna wanted to give Arjuna were given in the second chapter. The first chapter, the Prathama Adhyaya, Krishna hardly ever speaks. In fact, most of the talking in the first chapter is done by Arjuna himself. And you know the context, the war between Pandavas and Kauravas. Arjuna has gone, everyone has got prepared to fight. The conches are blown. And then suddenly, looking on the opposite side, who are fighting, his own people, his own relatives, people whom he respects, people who are close to him. And Arjuna says, no, I can't fight. Now, this seems a bit odd because it's like a blind date. Arjuna that day morning went out, had no idea where he was going. Of course, they were preparing for months for this. So it wasn't like it was a big surprise to him that he knew who were on the other side. So why didn't he think of this before? Why didn't this dilemma come to Arjuna's mind a day earlier, or a month earlier, or 6 months before? Why on that day itself? Now, one of the ways to understand that is oftentimes things remain in our mind in the conceptual form. Things don't become real until we experience them directly. It's like okay, think about it this way. This burning that is occurring in Canada and all this air pollution that is occurring everywhere. And I'm sure, I don't know how it's in Pittsburgh area, and in New York, at least, it shows really terrible situation. Boston, so far, at least, it doesn't seem to be that bad. But why do I mention all this is, it's not as if air pollution as an idea is unknown to us. We know, we read about it in papers, we see about the wildfires occurring on the West Coast, how people are suffering. But oftentimes it's something distant, it's something, an idea, it's some news that we read in the papers. But when we actually begin to experience the effects of it ourselves, then it suddenly becomes real. Or it's like if someone has to have a surgery, and then we know we are going to have a surgery, and we kind of prepare ourselves as best we can, but it's still an idea in the mind until you are actually there on the operation table. And then you have this whole environment, and then suddenly it becomes real. And so that's how, although Arjuna knew he was going to fight the battle, when he actually goes there and actually knows that the next moment now arrows are going to start flying, suddenly it becomes very real to him. And then we read how he, let alone learning from Krishna, he actually gives a long lecture to Krishna in the first thing about why first of all, he doesn't want to fight. And he gives the reason of why he doesn't want to fight. And the reason that Arjuna gives are actually very valid. I mean, all that he says is very true. I mean, war is a terrible business. Killing is bad, and it never does any good to anyone. So there is no argument about what Arjuna is saying. It's very true. But is that the real reason why he doesn't want to fight? And Krishna, who can see inside, like Ramakrishna said, he could see inside people as if in a glass case. So Krishna could see deep into Arjuna's heart and soul and see, yes, war is bad. I agree. I'm not saying you should go and fight. But your present reluctance to fight, is it because war is bad? Because you knew you were going to war even 6 months before. Why didn't you tell me all this that time? Why are you telling me now? And then the reason is completely different, as it turns out. And then Arjuna tells him, we read in the second chapter, that I'm confused. And only when Arjuna says that I'm confused, I do not know what is my duty in the present state, please guide me. And then Krishna's teachings begin. Now, the second chapter of the Gita, Krishna begins by describing to Arjuna the nature of the self, the nature of the Atman. And so the first half, up to almost verses 40 approximately, Krishna is giving the theory, the knowledge, the ideal, the essence of what our true nature is. And beginning verse 40, Krishna then introduces the idea of yoga, karma yoga. And then we read in the second chapter, for instance, if you go to your chapter 2 and look at verse number 39. Esha te abhihita sankhe buddhir yoge tvimam shruno buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. I've given you the wisdom that leads to self-realization. Now listen to the yoga of work. Using its insight, you will break through the bondage of karma. So what Krishna is saying is that the kind of a vishada, the disappointment, the grief that Arjuna is feeling, his reluctance to fight and the profound grief regarding the situation he finds himself in, the roots of that grief can be traced back to the existential suffering, our own deepest and deep suffering inside. That is why, yes, we find fulfillment and joy in many things in life, but nothing ever brings us total fulfillment, complete fulfillment. There's always this sense of incompleteness. So that vishada, that grief, that disappointment is really regarding that deepest core of something lacking in our heart. And what Krishna says in the first half of the second chapter is that can be removed only through our knowledge of who we are. If I know who I am, then all the roots, the grief and the suffering can be removed from its very roots. Now, in order to get that knowledge, we need to have purity of heart. Unless the mind becomes transparent, we cannot get that knowledge. That's why a sentence that Swami Vivekananda quoted very often was, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." That's a different way of putting the same idea, that only when my heart becomes pure, then I will see the truth. Now, Karma Yoga is a way to make the heart pure. And that's what he says, that listen to the yoga, Karma Yoga, using its insight, you will break through the bondage of karma. And then we come to verse 47. Now, as I'm mentioning all this to show that ideas of Karma Yoga don't begin and are not limited only to chapter 3. Krishna had already begun the teaching regarding Karma Yoga in the chapter 2 itself. Look at verse number 47. This is a very well-known verse. It's quoted very often. Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalahe turbhur ma te sangostva karmani. You have the right to work, but not to its results. May you not produce fresh karma, but neither should you be inactive. Now, very briefly, all of you have probably and mostly studied this verse before. What it simply says is that every action we do physical action or mental action. Mental action is thinking. So our physical activity and thinking, each of them lead to two results. If it is a good activity leading to good results, it brings us joy. If it's a weakening activity, then it brings us grief and sorrow. But alongside the experience of joy and sorrow, all these actions are simultaneously producing samskaras, deep mental impressions. So every action, every thinking is also producing samskaras. And it is these samskaras that going forward influence the kind of work that we do. So it's kind of a vicious circle. And that's why we find if we continue to think good thoughts, do good actions, we feel like doing more and more and more of them. And sometimes we kind of dig ourselves into a hole, try doing something negative, and then the natural tendency is to keep on doing more and more negative things. And so the only thing that will keep us on the right track is our power of the willpower. And therefore, in Karma Yoga, we find the ways to purify and to strengthen our willpower. It's possible to look upon all these 4 yogas as ways to purify and strengthen the different faculties of the mind. For instance, Jnana Yoga, so the cognitive function of the mind, the ability of the mind, the power of reasoning, the power of thinking, the rationality that we have, even that needs to be purified. It's not enough to just have a great power to reason. That power needs, because there are people whose power of reasoning hasn't purified. They use logic to do terrible things. People do awful things in life and they are able to justify it. They're using logic in their own twisted sort of way. So if we have to use that logic, use that power of reasoning in a positive, constructive way, something that will help me become enlightened, then that power of reasoning needs to be purified as well. And Jnana Yoga is what helps purify that power of reasoning. So it deals with the cognitive faculty of the mind. Now, Bhakti Yoga deals with the power of feelings and emotions. We know that feelings and emotions are very powerful. In fact, for most of us, feelings and emotions play a much larger, much deeper role in our life than many of us are willing to admit. Many of us like to think of ourselves as, oh, we are very rational people. We think and take decisions. And that's good. It's good to have that kind of a self feeling inside. But oftentimes, they have found through research that most of the decisions that most people take, they are taken emotionally. The emotions direct us towards certain conclusions, certain decisions. And our mind kind of plays a trick on us. First, we are emotionally attracted towards a certain decision, and then we find a reason, find our logic to reach that conclusion, which we have already reached through our emotional feelings. And then we tell ourselves, no, I used my logic. I thought about it, thought about all my pros and cons, and then I arrived at that decision. So we have to keep that in mind, that the emotions and feelings do play a big role. Now, they are also very powerful. When the emotions are purified, feelings are purified, they can take us to that highest ideal. Bhakti, Parabhakti, that deep devotion, that true and deep love for the spiritual ideal, that can come when my feelings and emotions are purified. Now, that is what Bhakti Yoga will help us do. And a third part of the mind is the willpower. Now, willpower, as it manifests in the internal world, in controlling, purifying, the disciplining of the mind inside, that is taken care of by Raja Yoga. And the same willpower, as we use it through our activities, through karma, through the work that we do, that is where Karma Yoga comes in. So it's good to keep this structure at the back of our mind. That where does Karma Yoga fit in? What does Karma Yoga do? What role it has to play in my life, and what I need to do. And that's what this verse 47 points out, that you have the right to work, but not to the results. By that is meant that we don't have a choice between working and not working. Now, the word work in our casual sort of conversation is often used in very limited ways. Because if someone is not, let's say on weekends, we don't have to go for their job on weekends. And so they say, well, I'm not working this weekend, or I'm going on a vacation, I'm not working. So the word work often gets limited to the job that we do to earn our livelihood. But when the word karma is used in the Gita, it's not simply in the sense of a job. So again, that's how we use English word work. But the karma really means every form of activity. Even though I may not be doing any job, I may be just sitting at home, not even moving from my chair. But if my mind is running about thinking all of this, I'm still doing karma. And so we have to understand karma in that larger sense. Now, we don't have, therefore, an choice between working and not working. Everyone works. Sometimes if we have some households, if there is some children are growing up and they don't seem to be doing any good productive work. I don't know how they do it in the West here, but oftentimes in India, it's very common to say in different languages, but it sounds like this: don't just sit there, do something. That's what sometimes older people will tell some of the younger members of the family. And that seems like, go and do something, don't just sit there. Actually, but if you see from the Gita perspective, doing something is easy. That's what everyone is doing all the time. They're doing something. But just sit there, that's very difficult. Just sitting, no activity, no physical activity, no mental activity. That's difficult. And therefore, we don't have a choice between working and not working. We are encased in this body and mind. The body and mind are programmed to be doing something or the other. Even when we are asleep, thank God the body still keeps breathing. So body keeps on working even we are fast asleep. Only time the mind kind of almost goes to some rest is in deep sleep. When we are dreaming, the mind is extremely active. And so there's a little bit of inactivity we experience for a few minutes every night when we are in deep sleep. Other than that, we are always acting. Now, the choice that we have is between doing good work or bad work, or a positive work or a negative work. Now, how do you define it? What's good, what's bad, what's positive, what's negative? And there are different ways to define it. And one way is any activity that goes to make me more selfish in some way is bad. It's not good for me. That's not my duty. Everything that goes to make me unselfish in one way or the other is good. Or the other way to put that is anything that makes me stronger, either physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, that's good. Anything that makes me weaker in some way. So whenever we have to make decisions in life, should I do this or should I not do this? Should I think this way or should I not think this way? A good way to ask oneself is whether that particular activity, will it make me stronger? Will it take me nearer to God? Will it make me a better person? And if we find the answer is yes, we should do it. If the answer is no, we shouldn't do it. So we have at least some way of some way of measuring, some way of determining whether something can be done or not. And that's what this verse says, that we have a right to work, but if we seek the results of that work, we will get the results, but the results are a mixed bag. The results could be in experiential terms, it could either be joy or sorrow. And we might say, well, of course, all of us really only want joy. Who wants sorrow? Now, the problem here is, as the Gita points out later on, that hard work itself is often not enough. Because sometimes some people don't work so hard and everything kind of comes to them. And then they find it just seems, at least for some time, they're quite happy. And some other people are working so hard, and somehow things don't turn out the way they do. And the reason for that is, for any activity to succeed, our hard work is essential, but there are several other factors in the world over which we have no control. And so we can do the best we can with the things that we have under our control. But because there are a lot of other things over which we don't have any control, the ultimate result is not in our hands. And therefore, Karma Yoga becomes very helpful, that I need to do everything, do the best I can, and leave the results in the hands of God. Look at the verse 49. Durena yavaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanaman vichha kripana phalahetavaha. Work with desire is inferior to the work done with a mind free from the thoughts about the results. Seek refuge in buddhi. Buddhi here means the awakened power. Now, buddhi we all have, intellect we all have, but our intellect is not fully open yet. And that's why one of the ways that one person is different from another is how much of their buddhi has opened. And that opening is different in different people. And that's why sometimes we see, and some people, they seem to grasp something very quickly, and some people take a little longer time to do so. It just shows how much of that buddhi is open. So what Krishna is pointing out is, Buddhau Sharanam Anvicha. Take refuge in your buddhi. In other words, all the knowledge that we seek, yes, books and teachers outside can be helpful, but the source of all knowledge is really in our own hearts, within our own buddhi. All that we need to do is open that buddhi. That is why when the students in the Vedic times went to study, the teacher didn't give them, take all these books and these assignments and keep on writing and doing this. No, what they did first, the first lesson was simply the Gayatri prayer, and says, repeat this prayer and meditate on it. And we know in the Gayatri, the last portion of that prayer is, Dhiyo yonah prachodayat, that Dhi is this same buddhi. So Gayatri prayer is for the awakening of our buddhi, opening out of our hearts so that more and more of that light comes out, and there is more light, then the darkness goes away. So that is the idea that Krishna points out in the second chapter. So he mentioned about the nature of the self, the jnana portion. Then he mentions about karma, how it is to be done. And then he's telling Arjuna, now go and do your duty. Now, Arjuna somehow gets it into his head that from what I have heard so far, it just feels as if the knowledge of the self is what everyone needs, it's what everyone should seek after. Then why aren't you telling me, go and get this knowledge of the self? Why are you telling me, now go and fight this dharma yuddha? You're asking me to use karma as a vehicle, while in the beginning, you have glorified the importance of knowledge. And that's the context why that question begins in the beginning of the third chapter. that you are saying that Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana. So if you feel that jnana, knowledge of the self, is higher than karma, then why are you asking me to go and fight this war? Why are you confusing me this way? I want to do what is the highest, the best. Why are you sending me towards the second best? And that's when Krishna answers. You look at verse 3 of chapter 3. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Vividha Nishtha Pura Prokta Maya Nagha Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. So what Krishna is telling Arjuna here is, yes, there are these two pathways, two things, two ways to do. So there are some people who are called to knowledge. There are some people who are called to work. So people who are called to knowledge should follow the path of knowledge. People who are called to work should follow the path of work. And then, of course, the question is, how do I know which path I am called to? And naturally, if there are two paths, and if someone says, this is the better path, this is a higher path, then of course, we want to go to the best path. Why would we take a second best? But that is the mistake that Arjuna is making here. There is no higher or lower here in as far as the path of knowledge and work is concerned. It is the idea of fitness. What am I fit for now? If right now, if I'm fit for the path of work and not fit for the path of knowledge, then going along the path of knowledge is not going to help me. In fact, it will hurt me. And that is something very important that all of us need to keep in mind. That something, and especially, jnana, the path of knowledge is very enchanting. It's kind of intellectually stimulating. It's at one level very satisfying. But we should also pause and say, great as this path is, and it gives me happiness, it makes me feel great, it makes me feel like that's what I want to do. But am I right now, in my present state, ready to benefit fully from this path? Or should I first do something to make myself ready so that I can benefit from this knowledge completely? And so the path of work, the path of knowledge, is what purifies the heart. And when the heart is purified, I get this knowledge fully. And therefore, the question that Arjuna asks Krishna, that if these two paths, and this is higher than this is lower, why are you asking me to fight? Is a little bit of a misunderstanding. Because yes, there are these two paths, and it depends on which path we are fit for. And essentially, although Krishna is not bluntly telling Arjuna that, but really what Krishna is saying is, right now, at this point, you need to fight. He's not really saying, what he's really meaning is, right now, you need to do your duty. If you do your duty well, in the spirit of Karma Yoga, then your heart will be purified. When your heart is purified, then you become fit for the path of knowledge. And when you become fit for the path of knowledge, then you again look at the same teaching about the nature of the self, the nature of the Atman. You will see the same thing in a very different light. It will not then simply remain a kind of a cerebral activity, something that only intellectually I'm able to appreciate, but something that touches my heart, something that can transform my life. And so this is something, the first thing we need to keep in mind when we begin studying chapter 3, the confusion in the mind of Arjuna, and the context in which the later teachings are given. So as I said earlier, chapter 2 in the classical way most Vedanta teachings are given is a complete text in itself, because it begins with the context when Arjuna asking Krishna that please accept me as your student, Krishna giving him that highest knowledge, describing to him the nature of the Atman, then telling him this is how you need to purify your heart in order to understand and grasp and truly experience that nature of the Atman. And then the concluding part of chapter 2, which gives the characteristics of the enlightened, called Sthita Prajna Lakshana, the characteristics of who is enlightened. Now, this is a very classical form of all the Vedanta texts. The highest ideal, the practice, the sadhana, in the end, the falashruti of what you will get when you attain the goal. And so some of the students of the Gita feel that if Arjuna were completely ready for that highest knowledge at that moment, he would have said, my doubts are gone. So he does say that in the end, after the end of the 18th chapter. My doubts are gone, now I know what to do. Now, it's good that he doesn't say it immediately at the end of the 2nd chapter. If he had said that, the Gita would have been a very small little booklet. And we could have then said, oh, I finished the Gita more quickly. But thankfully, for our benefit, if you like, Arjuna says, oh, I didn't understand this. What is the meaning of this? So you will see pretty much every chapter, beginning with chapter 3, begins with a certain question. So we can look upon chapter 3 till almost the beginning of chapter 18 as a very extended question-answer session. And it is good that Arjuna asked those questions, because many of those questions are the kind of question that can come to our own minds. So here Arjuna is a representative, representing all of us and asking those questions. And therefore, when Krishna is answering those questions, he's not answering them only for the benefit of Arjuna, but for the benefit of all of us. So in the introduction to the Gita, in that hymn called the Gita Mahatmya, they describe that the teaching of the Vedas, and Gita is the best summary of the Vedic teaching, is like a cow. And we know that oftentimes those who drink cow's milk know that first they'll have the calf go and drink a little milk. And looking at that, the mother is happy, the calf is there, and then the milk starts coming. And then, of course, it's not the entire milk of the cow, although it's meant for the calf, but then the rest of us are also able to get that milk. So similarly, Arjuna is the calf here. He is gone and he just become an instance of this Vedic knowledge coming out. And all of us, not just contemporaries of Arjuna, but all of us to the present day are learning and benefiting from the Gita. So we should be grateful to Arjuna for doing this for us. Of course, grateful to Krishna also, because ultimately it is his teachings that sustain us today. The next section of the main teaching that comes in chapter 3 is about the concept of yajna, or sacrifice, which is a very important subject. And we'll take a look at it tomorrow evening. But today I want to just bring your attention to one more verse in the 2nd chapter, also related to karma, in which it says, Buddhi yukto jahatiha ubhe sukrita dushkrute tasmat yogaya yujjasva yogav karmasu kaushalam. With the help of buddhi, that awakened buddhi, a person is freed in this life from both virtue and vice. Karma yoga means doing work skillfully. Devote yourself to this practice. Tasmat yogaya yujjasva. So yogav karmasu kaushalam, efficiency, work is yoga. Karma yoga is often described as efficiency in work. Now, efficiency is the word we understand in a normal way, just like how to do work efficiently. But from a spiritual sense, what does it mean to work efficiently? It means more than simply doing work in a very nice way. What it means is, normally we find that the more work that we do, the more tired we get, the more exhausted we get, the more stressed out we get. So doing work as a kaushala, as efficiently, would mean, can I do the same work in a way without, instead of tiring me, it'll energize me. Instead of stressing me, it'll remove my stress. Instead of binding me, it'll make me more free. And so work is sometimes thought of as a as a key. Excuse me. Work is sometimes thought of as a key. We know that we use the same key to lock a room and to unlock a room. You turn the key one way, it locks. You turn the key another way, it locks. So locking and unlocking, we use the same key depending on which way we turn it. Karma is exactly like that. If we do it the right way, it becomes karma yoga. You do it the wrong way, it becomes karma roga. So karma yoga doesn't mean being a workaholic. Like, oh, I work so much, I'm working 18 hours a day, and therefore I'm a karma yogi. No, not necessarily. So karma shouldn't become like a disease with us. By that I mean that, oh, I'm a compulsive worker, I need to work, I just can't sit without working. Then there is a problem. Karma yoga means that, yes, I recognize I need to work, but let me do work skillfully so that besides the other benefits I get from work, the work will also make me happy, make me less stressful, and make me more energizing. So how that is to be done, these are some of the clues that Krishna gives in chapter 2 itself. But the other way of doing that is doing work as a yajna, as a sacrifice. And more of that we will see tomorrow. So what I will do now in the 10 or 15 minutes that we have, because I can keep on talking, and there's no point in that way. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, and as far as possible, try to keep it confined to some of the ideas